What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for episode 208 in season 7. We're going to dive in with the Baylor preview and prediction, of course, as the main topic, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But what else is on the docket? Of course, as always, we'll talk some Big 12 in our Around the Big 12 segment. We'll take a look around week 12 in the conference, make my picks for the games that are happening in the conference this week as this tumultuous Big 12 conference race continues, and we'll see who ends up in that Big 12 championship game at season's end. But some interesting matchups to talk about within the conference this week, so we'll do that at the tail end of the episode. But before we get into the preview and then get into those Big 12 talk, we're going to talk a little bit about some WVU news and notes. I think it's what we're going to lead this one off with. At that time of the year right now where you got multiple sports going on. We got WVU football, we've got WVU basketball, we've got WVU women's basketball, who seems to be having a very strong season. So a lot of WVU sports going on. So we'll start off with the non-football sports first, give some news and notes updates on those, and then we will talk some WVU football news and notes updates before we shift gears, preview the game against Baylor. I'll give you my key to victory, give you my score prediction, and then we will talk some Big 12. And that's what we got going here on episode 208 of the CRW podcast. So now that I've gave you a little bit of debrief about what's to come and you know what's on the schedule for the episode, let's dive in here right away and talk a little bit about some of these news and notes for this week. Like I said, all these sports going on, got a lot to talk about here. So let's lead it off here. Let's talk a little bit about the WVU women's basketball team currently right now. They start off to a hot start. They are currently ranked number 15 in the country. As you see here on the screen, sharing their profile on the ESPN page for the WVU women's basketball team, 3-0 currently, number 1 in the Big 12. First 3 games, all blowout victories, 85-41 over Towson, 110-41 over Niagara, and then Pitt, 82-54 win in the backyard brawl there for the women. The men have the backyard brawl coming up as well. We'll talk about that momentarily. But 3-0 start for the WVU women's basketball team. And you know what, the most impressive thing to me, I've got to show you guys this just so you know it's actually a legit number. You go to this game against Niagara, and I know, no offense to Niagara, but it is obviously a lower level team, but this is still insane. I've never seen this, and that's why I had to share this. 44 turnovers the West Virginia women's basketball team forced, and they're looking like they're going to be a really good club this year. Who knows how far they could go? We know last year they gave Caitlin Clark and Iowa a run for their money in Mark Kellogg's first season, and now in Coach Kellogg's second season at the helm of WVU women's basketball, they look to be just as competitive, if not more so, for this upcoming season, and forcing 44 turnovers is insane. So currently they're ranked in the top 15 in the country, and WVU women's basketball off to a good start. And then, of course, as far as the WVU men's basketball team is concerned, off to a good start of their own, 2-0 right now in non-con. They've beat Robert Morris. They beat UMass. They were up big in both games. UMass came back late, made it a tough contest for West Virginia at the end, but they were still able to find a way to win. And then, of course, they now have the backyard brawl coming up on the road at Pittsburgh. Friday night at 8 p.m. is the next WVU men's basketball contest. Hopefully they're able to win that one. If they can, then they should find a way to get off to a good start in non-conference play before they play Gonzaga on November 27th, which is going to be a hell of a contest there. Gonzaga beat Baylor by, I think, 30 points or close to it. And then the rest of their non-conference slate, not too shabby. So they do have a good chance to build up a pretty positive record before Big 12 play starts, which is going to be tumultuous in that conference on that side as well on basketball, much like it is on the football side, because so many good teams. It's the best conference in college basketball, if you ask me. So, but West Virginia looks like they're going to be a competitive team within that conference in Coach DeVries' first year. Obviously, Tucker DeVries currently leading the team and scored almost 18 points a game. You got Javon Small, 14, Amani Hansberry, 13, Jonathan Powell, the freshman, 10. So, multiple double-digit scores for the first 2 games, and West Virginia's done a good job, really, I think, on the defensive end. What you're wondering about this team is their lack of size going to hurt them down the line? We'll see what happens. But this team looks to be competitive, and I like the way that they play, and so they're going to be a fun team to watch. So, wanted to cover a little bit about what each basketball team had done, both WVU men's and women's wise. Then other than that, the WVU basketball news that I wanted to talk about before we shift gears and do some WVU football news and notes was Tucker DeVries, who we just mentioned, currently the team's leading scorer here for his final year of college basketball after having a stellar career already. Obviously the son of Coach Darren DeVries, but he's named to the John R. Wooden Award watch list, which is, I think he's one of top 50 players. They're only named 50 preseason there, and Tucker DeVries was named one. So we got that piece of news. And then the final piece of news is something for the future of WVU basketball, because we've now got to see Darren DeVries, coach and see what his style's kind of like. And I think a lot of people have been impressed and liked the way the WVU basketball team have looked, but also, maybe not as noted has been the way that he's already hitting the recruiting trail running. Obviously, we see that with this team. It's all new pieces. No one that played last year is playing this year with Ofri Navay redshirt, who was the only returner. But recruiting-wise, even for future classes, he just scored this past week a commitment from a 4-star power forward in Trent McLean, son of Don McLean, a former college basketball star at UCLA, a legend there. And Trent McLean, 6'9", and kind of a similar playing style to a Tucker DeVries. So maybe you found your next fill-in after DeVries is gone to kind of take on his role there with this 4-star pickup. And not only is it, the 4-star pickup for this West Virginia basketball class for Darren DeVries, it's his second 4-star, and it's a second 4-star from California. So he's showing he'll go wherever the players are, and he'll get them to come to WV. Got 2 from California, then also have a 3-star in, I think Haythorne is the 3-star. We got Odie and now McLean as the 4-stars in the basketball class. So that's the WVU basketball news and notes. Now let's get into talking a little bit about some football news and notes here before we shift gears and talk about the upcoming game against the Baylor Bears. How about some award semifinalists for WVU, some players that have had really good seasons? One of those being the long snapper, someone that goes unheralded but really is one of the best long snappers in the country, is Austin Brinkman for West Virginia, and he's been honored as a Patrick Manley Award finalist. One of, I think, is it 10 or 20, something like that. But, one of the, like I said, best long snappers in the country, and that shows it. And glad to see he's a finalist. Would love to see him come home with that hardware and get that award. And then we also, of course, have Josiah Trotter having an incredible season. I think he is having a potential freshman All-American season. We'll see what happens at season's end. But leading the Mountaineers in tackles and is a candidate for the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award, given to one of the best freshmen in college football. He was named a semifinalist for that award, and rightfully so. Done a great job here, and hopefully will have a lasting career here at WVU where he can be an absolute stud, one of the best linebackers in quite some time. Anthony Wilson was named Big 12 Co-Defensive Player of the Week for his performance in the win over Cincinnati. 11 tackles and the 79-yard pick six being the main highlights there for Anthony Wilson, and the Big 12 recognized him for that. And then speaking of the Big 12, as far as TV times, we know we usually get those set, early this week at the start of the week. But for West Virginia's game against UCF, the time has been exercised with the 6-day window. So we'll have to wait and see what the time for our game against UCF will be here later this week and into the weekend before we will know that one. And then Shrine Bowl invites for some of West Virginia football seniors. We mentioned Austin Brinkman. He secures one. They also got one for Wyatt Milam, Garnett Hollis, and Sean Martin, all invited to the East-West Shrine Bowl at the end of the season. West Virginia's defense. We mentioned how well they performed in our Cincinnati Review and Reaction podcast. Check that out if you haven't already. But that, going right along with that, CBS Sports, slash 247 Sports, recognize that actually. They go through, each week, kind of name their coordinators of the week in each conference. And in the Big 12, their defensive coordinator of the week, none other than Jeff Kuntz, named there by CBS and 247 Sports for the performance West Virginia had against Cincinnati. And we're going to need another good performance for West Virginia's defense in this upcoming game against Baylor. So hopefully they're able to replicate that. But shout out to Jeff Kuntz for securing that award there. And then lastly, a WVU football recruiting update. And then we'll talk a quick injury update before we dive in on our Baylor preview. But West Virginia's recruiting class really is shaped up strong for this class of 2025, which will be closing in less than a month now with National Signing Day coming up December 4th. We've been reporting on the commits over on the CRW YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on the audio side, available on any podcast platform, be sure to head over to the Country Roads Webcast YouTube and give us a subscription there, where we cover recruiting from the transfer portal, from high school, all of that there on the channel as well in YouTube only videos. But I've obviously been covering the class there. West Virginia had up to 22 commits. Now they have 21 after they lose an offensive lineman. Thomas Barr announcing this past week that he is decommitted from the class. He was one of 4 offensive linemen in the class. So, at least West Virginia still has, multiple offensive linemen left, but now 3 offensive linemen in the class, 21 commits for WVU, which is having, a really strong close to this recruiting class after a really strong, lead in, after they kind of got a lot of these commits in a hurry already. So 20 plus commits, still 3 weeks out from signing day, and we'll see what happens there. Hopefully we're able to secure the signings from all those. I know they're not called letter of intents now; they're going to call them something else. So I'll just say the signings from all those 21 that you have verbally committed. But you do lose Thomas Barr on the offensive line. But maybe that means you're going to bring in someone else. West Virginia's still out there working on the recruiting trail, so we'll see what happens with that, and we will cover signing day on December 4th on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel as well. But then the last news and notes update before we shift into our Baylor preview is WVU football. Seems like they will be without Aubrey Burks and Aiden Garnes for the rest of the season. And Jaden Bray remains out and his status up in the air, but at least for the rest of the regular season. Now, if the Mountaineers get to a bowl game, which we're all expecting and hoping to see them do so, maybe we can see a return there. But sounds like Spear Aubrey Burks out for the rest of the year, so it'll be KK Tarnu there, as it has been the past couple of games. And then Aiden Garnes out at corner, and it'll be Dantes Fagan there, as it has been the past couple of games for the Mountaineers. But that's what I had news and notes wise, guys. I just want to provide some WVU sports news and notes updates here at the lead of this episode before we got into our preview. So, women's basketball, hope they continue their winning way. Same for the men. And then, of course, some news and notes on recruiting, injury updates, and such for the WVU football side. But which brings me to the Baylor preview, guys. We got to get into this. Let me give you guys a brief overview. Of course, obviously, going to be the 10th game of the season for the Mountaineers, currently sitting 5-4 overall, 4-2 in Big 12 play. And as we covered in the Cincinnati review episode, very much still in the mix, in the hunt in the Big 12 race. And they'll be taking on Baylor, who comes into Morgantown, also 5-4 overall, but 3-3 in Big 12 conference play. Coming up Saturday, the 16th, it's going to be a 4:00 p.m. kick, and it'll be televised on ESPN2. It is Military Appreciation Day in Morgantown there at the stadium for the Mountaineers. Dave Aranda, still the head coach of Baylor in his 5th season. This is the 13th meeting against Baylor, obviously starting when we got into the Big 12 conference. West Virginia currently leads the series 8-4, and 2 straight victories for West Virginia in the series, actually 2 straight wins over Baylor in the past couple of seasons. So there is a brief overview about this game. Obviously, we need to break down each side now. So let's do that. Let's talk a little bit about the Baylor offense. And I think this is an interesting area to start, because if you go back and talk about the game against Cincinnati in our lead up to that game, we were talking about some of the familiarity storylines, whether it was Jared Bartlett and WVU, as he used to play for the Mountaineers, now plays for Cincinnati, or Jeff Kuntz in Cincinnati, who now was the coordinator at WVU. He used to be a co-defense coordinator at Cincinnati, and for the second consecutive game for WVU. I think that familiarity storyline exists yet again. For those that don't know, the Baylor offensive coordinator, none other than Jake Spavital, who obviously was West Virginia's offensive coordinator 2 different times. Was a graduate assistant at WVU before that as well. But of course, most notably, the offensive coordinator of that 2018 explosive offense with Will Greer, David Sills, Gary Jennings, that nearly reached a Big 12 conference championship. He then went on to become the coach at Texas State, and then since then is now the offensive coordinator at Baylor, and really, took them a little bit to adjust to his system. I think took them a little bit to find the pieces to fit in that system. But once they have, their offense has really taken off in recent weeks. And unfortunately for us as Mountaineer fans, we're getting probably the best version of this Baylor team. Early in the season they had some struggles, but now they've really found a way to right the ship, particularly here on the offensive side. They're currently 3rd in the Big 12 in points per game, nearly 34. They average over 400 total yards per game at 419, which puts them in the top half of the conference as well at 8th. And really another thing, in addition to adjusting to the Jake Spavital system that has allowed them to really start taking off on offense, is getting the right quarterback in there. They had the Toledo transfer, DeQuan Finn, in there for most of the season. They really thought he was going to be a player, throughout the offseason. He was talked about, but didn't really mesh that right. Sometimes, it's just not a good fit. But ever since they made the switch to, a quarterback that's been there in the past, and we've seen in the past, Sawyer Robertson, that's when this Baylor offense really started to take off with him at the helm. And they've really been very good in recent weeks. And arguably no one in the Big 12 has been playing better at the quarterback position than Sawyer Robertson in those recent weeks. So West Virginia, with the defensive changes, with the new man in charge, Jeff Kuntz, put on a great performance in the first showing there against Cincinnati. But now in this game against Baylor, they're going to need that pass defense to show up yet again. I mentioned, previously in that Cincinnati review, you had your best coverage grade of the season by far, according to PFF. First coverage grade above 70, and it was 74 point something. Can't remember right off. But you need another performance from your coverage guys, from your secondary like you had against Cincinnati. You need to replicate that and hopefully maybe force some turnovers as well, because this Baylor offense is really good. They can throw the football and they can run it as well. And Sawyer Robertson, as I mentioned there, since he took over at quarterback, that's when that offense really hit its stride. So far on the season, 1,700 yards for him, 17 TDs, only 4 interceptions. He also can hurt you with his legs. 257 yards rushing. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry and has ran in 4 touchdowns. He is the highest graded player on the Baylor offense, nearly an 82 grade there, according to PFF. Running wise, they have a couple of running backs that they'll use. Pendergrass, who we've seen previously, but I think really the man to watch out for is a freshman running back in Bryson Washington. He leads them in rushing, and he's kind of a load to bring down at times, and he's really looking, like a guy that can be talented for them for multiple seasons. He's come on here as a freshman, 576 yards on the year, averaging over 6 yards per carry, and had 7 rushing touchdowns. Then wide receiver wise, I think the main one you want to look out for is Josh Cameron. He'll be wearing number 34 for the Baylor Bears there. He leads them in yards. He leads them in touchdowns, 424 yards on the year and 7 touchdowns for him as well. But then they have a tight end who they will, get the ball to in interesting ways. He transferred in from Ole Miss, and I think it's interesting that for the second consecutive game for WVU, they have to game plan for a team that has a transfer tight end that is really talented, and they really do some good things with. WVU did a pretty good job against Cincinnati, holding Joe Royer to only 4 receptions and didn't really allow him to make any big plays in the game. They're going to need to try and do that again against Michael Trigg, who is a weapon. He has 278 yards in the season on only 24 receptions and has scored 2 touchdowns for the Baylor offense. So you look at the West Virginia defense in this matchup, it's going to be interesting. It just depends. Is the West Virginia defense able to replicate what they did against Cincinnati? Because I think, I talked about in the lead up to that game a little bit, when you have a new coordinator and you don't really have any film on him, you don't know the way he's going to do things, you have the element of surprise on your side, at least for a game. Now, is it maybe for a game or two? West Virginia kind of has to hope that, I think, because now that you have some stuff on film, though, Jeff Kuntz mentioned in his interview this week, you have to self-scout a little bit and make sure you're not too predictable. So West Virginia doesn't want to be too predictable. Maybe they do some things a little bit different than the way they did against Cincinnati, because I don't think you have that element of surprise as much now. Baylor's going to have a chance to game plan and really an extra chance to game plan. Got to mention that as well. Baylor is coming off a bye week last week before they played this game. So they definitely are well studied on what West Virginia did defensively against Cincinnati. So I think that this will be really telling for Jeff Kuntz and for this West Virginia defense. Are the improvements legit, or is it, was it more the case of catching someone off guard and having that element of surprise a little bit? Or is this real? Is this, more aggressive calls, some more blitz, some more cover zero, some more man-to-man mixed in? Is this all going to be stuff we're going to see moving forward and stuff we're going to, work well in? I think you need Dantes Fagan to have another good game filling in for Aiden Garnes. You need KK Tarney to have another good game. Both those guys have really stepped up in recent weeks. And then, of course, the rest of your starters have really all played good. It's just a matter of, can your pass defense hold up and, limit this Baylor offense? I think your pass defense had its best performance of the season. We got to hope that really wasn't an aberration and something that continues for West Virginia with this kind of new look defense with Jeff Kuntz at the helm. So that's kind of my thoughts going into this one. I think that Baylor, I would give a slight advantage to, just because of how hot they are, how they're kind of hitting their stride, versus a West Virginia defense that is dealing with some injuries. They've, responded well with the way they dealt with those injuries in, the past couple of games, as this will be their 3rd consecutive game without those guys. But you still also have, a lot of new things that you're trying to work in there, including a new play caller versus a Baylor offense that's really already worked through those kinks with their new play caller that's been there since the beginning of the season, is now hitting their stride. So maybe slight advantage for Baylor, but if West Virginia can play even close to the way they played against Cincinnati, I think it's going to help them a lot. And I think you're going to need to force some turnovers in this game as well, because Baylor's offense is very good. So let's flip it over now. Let's talk about the other side. Let's preview the Baylor defense and talk about a little bit the West Virginia offense when they have the football, because there are some interesting storylines involved there heading into this one also. But the Baylor defense, the defensive coordinator by name, there by title is Matt Powledge in his second season there at Baylor. But Dave Aranda is the play caller here. So in a way, you could kind of consider him the coordinator as well. And, much like Neil Brown did last season in 2023, Neil Brown came into that year on the hot seat, decided to bet on himself, take back over play calling duties on the offensive side, and it really saved his job. One of the reasons was West Virginia's offense performed well. Dave Aranda maybe took notes, tried to do something similar this year. So I'm going to take over defensive play calling myself this year, trying to save my job with me on the hot seat, And so I think in the beginning of the year, you had mixed results with him choosing to do that, but really they've started to play better as the season has gone along. And I think the offense getting better has obviously helped in a complementary aspect there. But, Dave Aranda calling the plays here, trying to save his job. And I think he's pretty close to doing that, may have already done it. But, if they can secure bowl eligibility, I think he definitely will do that, much like Neil Brown did the season prior. So two guys that have bet on themselves and chosen to call the plays, having success with that in different ways, in different facets. West Virginia obviously had more success than what Baylor has had this year. But like I said, with as hot as Baylor is, who knows how strong they could close out the season. And that is a storyline headed into this game, is both teams looking to secure bowl eligibility. Whoever wins this, it will be their sixth win of the season. But as far as the Baylor defense is concerned, it will be another 3-down scheme for West Virginia to face. I think the pessimistic side there is West Virginia struggled against that 3-down, 3-safety look against Iowa State and Kansas State. The optimistic, viewpoint of going up against that defense again is it seemed like the third time was the charm when West Virginia faced it again against Cincinnati. It seemed like they figured out some things, and Brandon Yates had his best game by far going against one of those 3-down linemen defenses, as he, had to face one of the best nose tackles in the country in Dante Corleone and held his own. That's why I secured my Player of the Game award there following that game. But another 3-down lineman scheme that West Virginia will be facing, and some standout players. Really, a lot of these coming at the linebacker position, one being more of an edge. But, a guy that's been there for a long time is Matt Jones, leads the team in tackles, 78 on the season, also has 3 sacks. And then Keaton Thomas is their highest graded player on defense, according to PFF, with a 77 grade, and he has 75 tackles of his own. Also has thrown in a sack and an interception this season. But one player that really jumped out to me is the more edge type player that I was talking about there. It's a guy named Garmin Randolph. He leads Baylor with 3.5 sacks, which, obviously stands out when you're looking at the numbers. But what really jumped out to me is the size of this man. We're talking about a 6'8", 260-pound guy providing edge pressure there at Baylor, leading them in sacks that West Virginia is going to have to contend with. Now, the positive side there is obviously West Virginia's tackles on each side have both performed really well this season. Left tackle, Wyatt Milam, right tackle, Nick Malone, both having really good years. So that's the good aspect of that. But Baylor obviously going to throw some things at you defensively, throwing, some simulated pressures, some interesting stuff. Dave Aranda really good at, disguising things and mixing up the calls on defense. And we saw last year, in a year when West Virginia was doing really good on offense and really coming into that game on kind of a hot streak, them do some things that kind of threw West Virginia off on the road there, and West Virginia had to come from behind to defeat Baylor last season. So it's going to be an interesting chess match to see how the game plays out this year. As Neil Brown and Dave Aranda go head-to-head. Neil Brown calling the offensive plays, Dave Aranda calling the defensive plays. But obviously, one of the interesting aspects of this game to think about is, of course, the quarterback situation for West Virginia. And, Neil Brown, to this point, kind of non-committal on that, and don't blame him. He doesn't want to give Baylor, necessarily any advantages, and kind of has to force them to prepare for both quarterbacks. As far as West Virginia is concerned, they saw Sawyer Robertson last season for Baylor, so though they've made that switch, we've already seen him. Baylor hasn't faced Nico Marchiol, so maybe, that's something you're throwing into the thoughts process there. If you're Neil Brown, you're Tyler Allen trying to make this decision if Garrett Green's healthy. They haven't faced Nico, but they also may have tape on Nico now after the past couple of weeks. I think if Nico was coming off a stronger performance, if the way he performed in the Cincinnati and Arizona games were flipped, you would probably definitely say, hey, we're 100% sticking with Nico. Because I think if you do decide to go with Garrett, which I think we're all kind of expecting Neil to do, knowing his history, then you run the risk of, if you lose the game against Baylor, the fan base is really going to be coming at you and your decision to do that if you're Neil Brown, because you kind of are on a 2-game winning streak right now with Nico at the helm, and that's immediately the thing everyone's going to point to is Neil Brown going back to Garrett Green and then us losing. He threw off the rhythm. He threw off the momentum. Everyone's going to call that out. So that's something that maybe is in his head. I'm not sure. But I think if you're Neil Brown, you can't let that factor into your decision, obviously. But it is interesting to think about because Nico probably does give you a little bit, something extra in the passing game, can hit maybe some throws that Garrett can't, can fit it into some more tight windows, a little bit more accurate with the football. But then also Garrett adds a little something to your running game. And we saw last week West Virginia have one of their worst rushing performances in quite some time. So, if you're thinking about Garrett adding some yards to that, that's something that you're factoring in if you're Neil Brown. But I think obviously we're expecting Neil Brown to probably go with Garrett Green here, just as my personal opinion. Is that what I would do? I don't know. It's really close to call for me, especially when I go back, and one of the things that kind of I think will solidify the fact that Neil Brown will go with Garrett Green is if he's 100% healthy, which he'll probably hopefully show this week in practice, is Garrett Green's performance against Baylor last year. As I mentioned, West Virginia, yes, they had to come from behind, but it was also one of Garrett Green's best games of the season. Last year against Baylor, Garrett Green, 270 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, also with 16 to 25 on his higher completion percentages of the season, and he added 103 rushing yards and 2 other touchdowns. So you're talking about a game last year where Garrett Green was nearly 380 total yards of offense and 4 touchdowns for you against Baylor. So, that's obviously probably maybe going to factor in for your decision if you're Neil Brown, but we'll see how it shakes out. The good thing, I think, here, if you're a West Virginia fan, is that we probably now have the ability as a fan base to be confident in either quarterback. We've seen them both win games. Nico, currently at this point, undefeated as a starter, and then Garrett really showed us some good things in 2023. I know it's been a bit more of a mixed bag in 2024, but maybe, a couple weeks off, now he's 100% for one of the first times in a long time, and maybe we see that 2023 version of Garrett Green. I think either way we go, it's not going to be, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer if you're asking me personally. But I think Neil Brown will go with Garrett Green, but we'll see what happens. Either way, I think that this matchup is a bit of a wash right now for me at this point in the season. West Virginia's offense has shown some good things this season. When West Virginia has scored 30 plus, they've won a lot. See the past 2 games, they've been, scored 31 points in each of the past 2 games and held the opponent just under 30. So, that's your recipe. I think if you're West Virginia, if you're Neil Brown, whoever's a quarterback, let's try and get to 30. But I think you also have to try and run the football and have more success with that in this game than you have, recently, especially last game against Cincinnati. West Virginia's got to get the run game going here against Baylor for sure. Got to make that happen. But it's going to be an interesting chess match between Neil Brown and Dave Aranda when WVU has the ball. But those are my thoughts kind of on each side of the ball there. The Baylor offense, the Baylor defense versus, of course, the West Virginia defense and the West Virginia offense, which then leads into now my key to victory here in this one. And I think for me, it's really the West Virginia defense. When you look at that performance against Cincinnati, one thing they did was get turnovers. But what led to those turnovers was West Virginia pressuring the quarterback. They got TFLs, they got sacks in the game. And even when they didn't get home, they were forcing mistakes. From the very beginning of the game, they were aggressive on 3rd down, going coverage 0, all-out blitz on Cincinnati's first 3rd and long that they faced. And I think that hopefully West Virginia will continue to do that. And they're going to have to in this game, I think, try and force Sawyer Robertson into some mistakes. So let's get some pressure on him. TJ Jackson's been great at that this season. West Virginia's been a pretty good pass rushing team as a whole this season. And then really, so that makes my key to victory. Pressure Robertson, force him into mistakes. And one of the things that made me, select this was looking at Baylor's team grades on PFF. They're actually currently 14th out of the 16 Big 12 teams in pass blocking grade with only a 73 grade there. So, hey, let's stress that a little bit. Let's bring some extra pressure at times when possible. Pick your spots. I think Jeff Kuntz did a good job picking his spots against Cincinnati. Hopefully he has a good feel for that again in this one. But I think let's apply some pressure and hopefully force Robertson into some mistakes, and maybe we'll get some turnovers. Pressure in the quarterback, my key to victory, and one guy to watch for West Virginia that has done a great job of that, as I mentioned, TJ Jackson, top 5 in the conference in sacks with 5.5, and he currently leads the Big 12 conference in tackles for a loss with 12. So that's my key, which then, of course, brings me to the score prediction, guys. It's that time of the episode yet again to provide my prediction for the Mountaineers game this week. And I know you guys have probably been hating me in recent episodes. It's been a while since I predicted a WVU victory. And, part of me wants to continue that trend, to not jinx it, especially after they've won 2 straight games. But guys, I got a good feeling right now about this team, the way that they seem to be balled in here at the end of the season after that final bye week to try and win out these final 4 games. I think getting that win over Cincinnati was big as far as momentum was concerned, as far as buy-in and belief was concerned of it being possible. And now they're even seeing the kind of the fruits of their labor already as West Virginia's in the mix, tied for third in the conference currently with a shot if they continue to win out. So I think it's good vibes around the team, and that's created a little bit of hope around the fan base as well that should lead to a good atmosphere. And really, I think you're due for a win at home. You're due for a good performance at home. West Virginia started off Big 12 road play 3-0 for the first time since they've been in the conference, but they haven't played so good in home games, especially in the Big 12. Even the win against Kansas, they had to come from behind. So we're due, a good home performance as a fan base. We've all been, relying on it, and I think hopefully we'll be rewarded by the football gods. So finally, guys, I'm coming back. I'm throwing the gold and blue glasses back on. I'm going to be optimistic yet again. I think West Virginia's defense is able to get some pressure, do enough. Maybe they force a turnover or two. And I think West Virginia's offense, no matter which quarterback's at the helm, is going to be able to, move the football and score enough points to get the win. The home crowd behind them, the good momentum behind them, the good vibes going on right now within the program as they feel like they really have a shot in this Big 12 conference, all as a buoy lead to a West Virginia victory in this one. I'm going WVU, and similar formula. So you'll see here a score that's similar to what the previous 2 game scores were, and I'm going 30-27 West Virginia over Baylor. West Virginia gets 30. They keep their opponent slightly below 30, just like they did against Arizona and Cincinnati. Mountaineers win at 30-27 is my prediction in this one, and hopefully I'm finally correct. I was glad being wrong the past couple of preview shows, but hopefully this time I'm correct as I'm selecting the Mountaineer victory, guys. But that's pretty much all I've got on the Baylor preview side of things here. Wanted to touch on each side of the ball there. And of course, as always, provide my key to victory and my score prediction. But now, guys, it's that time to pull up the Big 12 schedule for this week here. Can't believe it's already week 12 in the Big 12 conference, but it's a crazy race right now within this conference. So let's pull up this week's games, and I'm going to make my picks for who I think will win and emerge victorious in some of these games. Some of it, based on who I really think will win. Some of it based on, trying to manifest some things for the Mountaineers maybe. You never know what could happen with that. So that's definitely one way that I'm looking at it here in this one. But we do have a Friday game here. So we're going to start here on Friday, November 15th. It'll be at 10:15 Eastern. So a late kick on Fox Sports 1 on Friday night, as this game is in Arizona. Houston travels to Tucson to take on Arizona. And I think, maybe a few weeks ago, maybe earlier in the season, I definitely would have taken Arizona. I think Arizona does have a decent offense, but their defense is just a liability right now. I think they've shown that. And Houston has shown to be a team that can play some good defense. Their offense has been a bit of a mixed bag. It's been better since they made some changes at the quarterback position. But I think Willie Fritz is a really good coach. And I think they're going to go on the road and they're going to get another Big 12 win. They've surprised with how many they've already gotten. I think they steal another one on a Friday night. Give me the Cougars. Houston gets the win over Arizona, I think, on Friday, which then brings us to our Saturday slate within the conference, and an important game Mountaineer fans should be watching here. The latter portion of the season, we're probably going to have eyes on Colorado, K-State and Iowa State as well. But West Virginia needs Colorado to drop another game. And you guys know in one of the scenarios laid out, if Utah beats Colorado, West Virginia wins out, and Iowa State beats Kansas State, WVU's in the Big 12 title game. So it's crazy, and much as it pains me to say, we kind of got to root for Utah this week. Oh, sorry, almost threw up in my mouth a little bit there, guys, because you guys know we're no fans of Utah, mainly because how the fan base acted coming into the season. You saw, of course, their athletic director last week. Kind of that all starts at the top, maybe that pretentiousness and all of that. So, but unfortunately, we need them to get a win here over Colorado. And I think maybe the positive aspect of this matchup is Utah. If they do one thing well, it's defense. Their offense has been pretty lackluster this season, but they are usually a pretty good defense. So maybe they're able to limit Colorado a little bit, enough to make this, muddy the waters a little bit, make this kind of a rock fight and try and get a win there. It's a noon Eastern game. It's going to be on Fox. Colorado, obviously, in the, driver's seat there to get the second place spot and potentially end up in the Big 12 championship game. So they're going to have a lot of momentum. They have the potential Heisman winner, maybe the favorite right now in Travis Hunter. They have some really good talent, but this is one of those things. Much like last week, it worked. So we're coming back to it. Last week, Brad and I picked Kansas over Iowa State just to try to manifest it, get that to happen. It worked. So yet again, haven't done this a lot around the Big 12 segment this year, but I'm going to pick Utah this week. Utah over Colorado at noon. West Virginia needs it to happen. Let's speak it into existence. Let's go Utes. Go get a win there in Boulder. And then, of course, we talked about the Mountaineers and Bears at 4 on ESPN2. Next game, there's going to be our game of the week. We'll bounce back to that one. Cincinnati and Iowa State is going to be one we're going to have eyes on, obviously, for a lot of reasons. We need Iowa State to beat Kansas State, but wouldn't mind them catching another L on the way to do so. Cincinnati and Iowa State here at 8 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Night game there in Ames. Obviously, I'm watching this for multiple reasons because of the interest in the Iowa State game, but also West Virginia just played Cincinnati, and I want to see how good does Cincinnati stack up to some teams that we've played already as well? Because, Cincinnati came into that game with a winning record. It was big for Neil Brown to get that win over a team with a winning record, but also we want to see how Cincinnati closes the season to see how good of a team they are. If they go out and compete with Iowa State, make this a football game, then definitely it looks better on us, and you feel a little bit better about where WVU sits within this conference as well. But night games and Ames are always tough. Iowa State's lost 2 in a row. Are they going to drop 3 in a row? I find that hard to believe with a team that started 7-0. It could happen. Cincinnati, no slouch. But I think Iowa State finds a way to bounce back. I'm going to pick Iowa State to get the win here, although, I'll kind of be rooting for Cincinnati a little bit. But I think Iowa State will get it done. Give me Iowa State in that game. And then, of course, we got other teams on a bye, so we only have 2 more games to talk about here. One being Kansas, hitting the road to take on BYU. 10:15 Eastern kick on ESPN. Obviously, we have to stay up late to catch this one with it being in Provo. And you guys know we've been a pro BYU podcast all year here on the CRW. We like the Cougars. We like their fan base. But this is going to be an interesting matchup, I think. Because you look, BYU, obviously it was the Holy War, so you never know what can happen in a rivalry game, but they had to come from behind yet again. They've had to have that, in a couple games in recent weeks against teams that haven't been so strong, against Oklahoma State, against Utah. And, there's a lot of crazy wins in championship seasons, a little bit of luck involved there, sometimes a little bit of a team of destiny, much like TCU was the year they went to the playoffs. Some people have been comparing BYU to that. So I think there's that aspect going into it that makes you wonder if this could be a game. But then also you have Kansas finally hitting their stride, playing their best football of the season. And Kansas, they have a losing record, but they haven't been a bad team. Every game that they've lost, save for, I think, one, they've had a lead in the fourth quarter. And that was before Jalen Daniels had knocked the rust off and looked kind of like his old self. But now in recent weeks, he really does look like his old self, and Kansas is playing really good. So I think that this is going to be a competitive football game, guys. I truly do. But as I mentioned, BYU just seems like a team of destiny, and I think that they're going to find a way to get it done playing at home under the lights on ESPN, and BYU gets the win there. Which brings us to the game of the week this week in our Around the Big 12 segment here. Week 12 in the Big 12, Arizona State and Kansas State, 2 teams vying for that, trip to the Big 12 conference title game. They're locked into that, multi-team tie. They're in the third place position with 2 conference losses. So, this right here, a de facto elimination game, much like last week's game between West Virginia and Cincinnati was a de facto elimination game. Arizona State and Kansas State falls into that category as well, which is why it's our game of the week this week. It'll be a 7 o'clock Eastern kick on ESPN. It's in Manhattan, Arizona State traveling there for this one. This one's tough to call. Arizona State's been playing some really good football. Kansas State, obviously a lot better at home, really good in the Little Apple. I think I'm going to roll with the Wildcats on this one, but I think this is one that could go either way. But I think Kansas State will find a way to get it done. And, I know I was talking about trying to manifest things, and then I go and pick both Kansas State and Iowa State to win. So I guess this is more of the aspect of me picking, with my head more so than trying to speak something into existence on those couple ones. So give me Kansas State in our game of the week this week in the Around the Big 12 segment. I think they just slightly edge out Arizona State. I'll say by field goal at the end maybe. So I'll go with Kansas State there. So there it is, my picks for Big 12 in week 12. there to wrap up our Around the Big 12 segment here in episode 208 of the CRW podcast, our Baylor preview and predictions edition here, if I could get that out correctly. I tackled this one solo, obviously. Brad and Steven still out on assignment, as I'm sure you've noticed throughout the episode. But if you made it this far, all the way through the news and notes, the Baylor preview, the score prediction, and of course the Around the Big 12 segment, definitely just got to tell you, I appreciate you tuning into this episode, whether you took it in on the YouTube version there, the video. If you did that, just take a second, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like. It really helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. But we appreciate those that listen on the audio side there as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. You can find it anywhere. And if you listen to the audio version, just leave us a rating really quick. That helps us on that side of things, and preferably a 5-star one if you would. And of course, always got to shout out WVSportsNow.com for hosting our episodes on their site as well. And you can catch the video version there also. But other than that, that's pretty much all I've got here, guys. We'll have our live stream Thursday night. You guys can come share your predictions for this game in our live stream, and we'll chat with you guys over on the CRW YouTube channel. So like I said, if you do listen to the audio side, do be sure to hop over to YouTube, give us a subscription on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel where you get that extra bonus content, including live streams where we get to chat with you guys. We also have members-only content where you can join as a member, get a badge beside your name, a nice WVU football helmet. You get player grades videos, you get snap counts, you get film reviews, you get game rewatch commentaries, you get depth chart projections, all of that if you become a member of the CRW YouTube channel. So just something to think about and keep in mind if you can't ever get enough WVU football content. I know I fall into that category myself. I'm sure there are others like me, but guys, got to hope West Virginia finds a way to make it 3 wins in a row. We're cheering for the Mountaineers to win out and remain in this Big 12 race, guys. They've got to do it here, and they've got to do it against what is a team playing really well right now on the season in Baylor, and particularly an offense is playing really well as well. So I think it's a good test for Jeff Kuntz, who's kind of auditioning maybe to be the full-time West Virginia defensive coordinator beyond just the end of the season. Did a great job in game 1. We're hoping he replicates that here in game 2. But regardless of the result, we'll be back to talk about it on our Baylor review and reaction podcast releasing early next week, but hopefully it's another fun one to talk about. Hopefully it's after another Mountaineer win as West Virginia tries to remain right here in this race for that second place in the Big 12 and maybe make their first ever appearance in the Big 12 title game. It's not out of the realm of possibility right now, but you have to take care of your part and just win. That's all. If you're a West Virginia football player, that's all you got to worry about right now is go 1-0 each week, just like they've talked about. You did it against Cincinnati. Now you got to try and do it again against Baylor. And here's to hoping it happens from us here at the CRW. Appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode of the podcast. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those